Sir, let's talk about statistics. Looking at the conditions of the problems we have in some tourist destinations outside of the Philippines, do we have any effects right now? Are we getting data and statistics already, even though it's raw, affecting because of these so-called terror or activities affecting some portions or regions of the world? Do we have data on this?
We see clearly some countries that have been very much affected by certain events, and then by travel advices that came after that. And what our position also is very clear, that our sector has been affected. Our sector is affected by security issues. Our sector has a capacity to recover very quickly, and countries affected should receive international support and not be isolated, not be in a way punished by the problem that they have suffered. To the contrary, if there is a problem in certain countries, if that is the desire of that country, it should receive international support in order to overcome the security issues. Because we don't want countries to be punished twice. First by security problem, and second by misperception from the international communities. So international community should join hands to support that country to overcome those difficulties.
Sir. Perhaps I would like to suggest that, because together with us today is also our authority of data, and that is my colleague John Kester, who is heading our market trends department, who actually is leading our team in producing all sorts of UNWTO data. Perhaps, John, you wanted to add a few things, especially by the pattern when a crisis comes, how it affects the tourism in figures.
Sorry.
No, you just take it.
Thank you very much. Let me first draw the picture in general terms. We have actually been very much surprised about the robustness of demand in the past 7 years. After we had the economic crisis of 2008-2009, we have seen 4% overall growth in demand for 7 years in a row, and actually we are now crunching the data for 2017, the first months, and we do see that still continue. And it has actually been very, very robust. So people do have a strong appetite to travel. Where they travel, of course, depends a little bit on how countries do promote themselves. It depends on how people perceive risk in those countries, and you can work on that. And we have seen shifts, temporal shifts from one destination to another, and we have some countries doing very, very well, some countries not seen that well, but overall there is a robust growth out there. I think that's a little bit the opposite, not the opposite, but complementary to what Marshall has been telling. Of course, if you are facing crisis, it depends very much on how you deal with it. First of all, countries need to be prepared. There can happen always something. There can happen something of a natural kind. There can something happen of a political kind. And part of being successful in tourism is that you are able to address those situations. And countries should also, the capacity of reacting on that should be part and parcel of their tourism marketing and promotion. That said, we do see some very good examples there as well. And then what we do see is generally that countries do have a capacity to recover in time. That can take a bit longer, that can take a little bit less time depending on what actions are taken. For instance, when you're hit by crisis, it makes sense to go to your source markets that are most familiar with your destination, because they know the destination by themselves, and they do know that if something happens in one part of the country, that doesn't affect other parts of the country. And there are a number. UNWTO has been working with countries that have been affected in this sense, with crisis communications, with crisis preparedness, and that's an important part of the work. I wanted to make one little addition to the question of the gentleman before. Yes, UNWTO does have a role with regard to statistics, but we don't collect them primarily. The primary data collection is always done by the country. Our role is in deciding on a methodology, on getting a consensus, getting agreement about how we, what we should measure and how we should measure. It are the countries that that execute that. And in principle, data you get from a PATA or a UNWTO or the WTTC should be based upon the same data that's collected in that country. Of course, we need to have an ability to read it well. We need first to see, are we talking about the same thing? We can say arrivals, but are we talking about arrivals only of overnight arrivals? Or are we talking about arrivals including same-day arrivals? That might give a difference, but in principle, and we do collaborate also with PATA, and sometimes we exchange notes on data, and if we do have some doubts about data, we might consult them and see if we can clarify the issue. So that's for the moment what I would like to add.
Just for the record, his name is John Kester, UNWTO. Okay, Michael?
Good afternoon. I am Mikael Flores. I'm with Nikkei Asian Review. We're seeing a rise of young Asians, whom we call fully independent travelers, changing the industry in a way with them creating their own itineraries and pursuing and traveling to uncovered destinations in the past. So how does the industry react to this, and how is this changing the tourism market in the region, particularly Asia? And from a government standpoint, what kind of policies should we adopt to cater to the needs and to this growing market trend? And lastly, statistically, can we measure this, or are there challenges in terms of measuring this kind of market, considering that they book their hotels via, they book their accommodation via Airbnb? Well, they travel in rather unconventional trends or measures. Thank you.
Let me start, and then my colleagues here at the table would complement. Actually, you raised many different issues there, but they are all important, related to the youth travel, basically youth travel. Let's go back a little bit to what my colleague here, Shujin, said about the regional travel, intra-regional travel. And that is very, very important. In our research, we see that about the average around the world is 80% of intra-regional travel, international travel. That means, in average, 80% of the, let's say, international tourists that come into any region, the countries of that region come from the same region. So that's why it's important to keep an effort in promoting destination in the region. Like here we talked about promoting the Philippines, in China, in Japan, and Korea as examples. That is equally important for other parts of the world. The same example holds for other parts of the world. Second, we have this, with this fast growing numbers of people traveling around the world, as John Kester just mentioned. recalling an increase of an average of 4% per year in the last 7 years after the economic crisis, that have brought the figures from 920 million international tourists in 2009 to 1,235 million last year. That means a growth of 33% in 7 years. A lot of this has come from the youth travel. And with that, what we call a travel revolution, there is also the technology revolution. And the two are interacting and feeding each other. So there is a change in pattern in how people travel, where they stay, how they look for their accommodations. But also there is another thing that is happening is the tourists have a strong voice, and that the business have to be very much aware, because now they can they tell to the world what has gone well and what has not gone well, where they have been treated well, where they have not been treated so well. So that is, I think in that aspect, the Philippines have a great advantage because of the nature of the Filipinos. They are very welcoming people, very kind people. People from outside interact very well with the Filipinos here and everywhere around the world where we meet the people from the Philippines. So you have a great advantage point on that. So, and we have conducted a lot of research in that area, how the youth, how the young traveler talk about destinations. And I would like to ask my colleagues here to complement on those aspects, being more specific to the region.
How to react to the two revolutions, the IT revolutions in particular, when you mentioned, in addition to the travel revolution. Travel revolution, one aspect is about the youth travel. To me, probably the reaction can be in two areas. Number one, in the distribution channel. In the long past, when a guy wants to travel, you usually go to a physical outlet of a travel agency, and not anymore. So the distribution goes through typically booking.com, and the distribution goes through any type of online travel agencies. So this is probably the biggest change in distribution channel of tourism products and many other things. And second area is, as a tourism board, when you promote your destination in the past, what you do is usually you go to physical travel fairs and distribute your pamphlets, physical paper, and not anymore. That probably, if you take most destinations in Asia, if you want to penetrate the Chinese market, now you go to WeChat, which is the most effective influencer when it comes to the Chinese travelers. So certainly, like you do with most of the Western tourists, that you go through TripAdvisor for the review part in order to influence the way of marketing and promotion.
We have time for 2 more questions.